Hi, I'm Juan Martinez, Technology Editor at CBS Interactive. Thank you for joining me today as we discuss the ways in which HP can help IT departments in small and mid-sized businesses operate more efficiently and more cost-effectively. I'm joined today by Josh Kulawine, ISS America's Product Manager at HP. Josh has been at HP for 5 years and is responsible for developing and managing HP's line of DL Rack series servers, working to position HP as the leader for both enterprise data centers and small to medium businesses. Prior to his current role, Josh managed the ProLiant ML Tower Line products, focusing on developing solutions that address key SMB problems. Josh has an MS in marketing from Texas A&M University. Now, before I turn things over to Josh, I'd like to remind everyone that you can submit questions for Josh by clicking on the Ask a Question button. Shortly after we receive the question, someone will follow up with you for more information. And with that, I'll turn things over to Josh. Josh, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Juan. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the time today. With that, I think I'll go ahead and get going, if this sounds good to you guys. So, Juan did a great job giving me that introduction today, but like he said, my name is Josh. I work for HP. I am a product manager on our server side, and I want to spend a couple minutes kind of talking today about what we've done really based on customer feedback, building things into the servers to give them a little bit better ease of use. How much time can you spend, or how little time you can spend, more appropriately, actually managing and touching servers? Because everything that we did from a server side, was really based off customer feedback, saying, hey, I would like to spend less time managing this, fewer touch points, et cetera, et cetera. And we really built that into our entire server portfolio. We have a very wide one, as you can see here. We've got some stuff on the right here that's a little bit more targeted towards larger enterprise, so I'm really not going to talk too much about that. What I'm going to do is cover general stuff that we really built into our tower line, what we call ML, or our rack line, what we call DL, really targeted towards SMB customers. I kept blades in there because as customers grow into more of a mid-market and even up from there out of the smaller and SMB size, a lot of them start to look at blades, and for compute intensive and dense compute, or even if you're just looking to get as power efficient as possible, they become a play. So what I'm going to talk about kind of goes across all of those. And from an HP perspective, what everything is based on is something that we call ILO. It's our ILO management engine. Now, some of you guys who might be familiar with HP, either recently or from years and years ago, might be familiar with ILO. It is our management engine, and it's a proprietary chip. It's something we as HP build into all the system boards. One of the great things in our latest generation, what we call Gen 8 of servers, is that we built ILO into everything. You can buy a $550 micro server intended for small office and home office environments, all the way up to a $30,000 rack or blade server, and it's going to have the exact same ILO chip in there. It's completely out of band, meaning I don't care what the rest of the system does. It can take a complete failure, and I can still use that to troubleshoot. I can still use that to manage from a customer perspective. It also has some great capabilities for remote management. With ILO, you can remotely manage a server with some of our advanced features, from very basic to I want to see it's there and turn it off and turn it on, to more advanced, I want to load an OS. I want to completely troubleshoot and do a virtual KVM. Right? I want to be able to have full control, and almost anything I can do physically in front of the server, I can do with the ILO Advanced as well. We see a lot of customers who use that. If you have multiple sites, obviously that's a big one. You might be the only or one of only a few IT people in the company, and you've got 10 sites or 20 sites or maybe even more than that that you need to support. This allows you to do that without having to travel around. So we see a lot of use case out of that. But outside of that, we also embed more into that base functionality in the server as well. So ILO comes with a set of default features that really focus on making that server easier to use, so you as a customer aren't touching it and aren't spending time keeping the lights on, quote unquote, and instead can spend time being proactive, working on the next project and making money for a company and the company you work for, versus being viewed as maybe a cost center. So that was really the goal. And there's a couple areas you see on here that we really focused on as we did this, and so far we've gotten really good feedback that customers have been able to use. The first one is, and I'll talk about each of these, setup and install. That's one key time commitment point from customers. The second you see labeled in the middle here as active health, tech support. Okay, so how do we reduce that amount of time? And the third is system management and updating. First, around setup and install, there are some things that we added that sound small, but in my opinion, really goes back to view how much of a time commitment we put into, reducing these touch points from a customer side. And one you see on here shows early video, and you see the stat on the bottom of the screen that says you can see information after 3 seconds. If you guys have booted up and installed and done servers in the past, years and years and years ago, it might take 10 seconds before you see something after you hit the power button. Well, as servers get more complex and people do more with them as virtualization comes around and I put more in the server, it takes longer and longer. It can take 30 seconds or a minute or even longer on some of the bigger systems. So what we said was, customers told us, I really want to know it's booting first and foremost, so it's not 8 a.m., the coffee hasn't kicked in and I'm not power cycling it while I wait and figure out if it's doing something. And secondly, I'd really like to know what's going on. So what we said is, let's give that video capability to ILO. Again, ILO's the brains, it's completely out of band, it's the first thing to get power. So now, instead of having to wait maybe a minute to see something, we'll show you something on screen, and this is a screenshot of it, after 3 seconds. It says, yes, I'm booting, this is what I'm doing, and here's my % complete. So it's very cool, kind of an ease of mind. Again, you're not spending that time up front. The bigger advantage here, though, that we've seen from customers is in the event of an error. That's always when it takes the most time, when something goes wrong. Now, you can see on screen here, when something goes wrong, we will show you exactly what it is. Previously, it was called a black screen no boot, is what a lot of customers and a lot of people in the industry called it. Basically meant the server would halt, you've given no information, hence the black screen, except for maybe some beep codes if you really wanted to see what those figured out. Well, now you can look at it and say, I know exactly what's wrong in plain English, no error codes. The example you see on here says processor 1 DIM 4 has an uncorrectable memory error, action replaced in mentioned above. So now you guys can know exactly what's wrong, go do it, and then continue on to setting the server up instead of possibly having to troubleshoot yourself or even maybe call tech support, and then who knows how long the turnaround time will be. It depends on what your service level is. So it's a small level, but it's how do we reduce the amount of time that you guys have to spend. The other key part of getting it up and running is obviously I need to set up my OS, get my operating system, get everything up and running, get my settings correct. The other thing we've done, you see on here just flipped on, is termed intelligent provisioning. Intelligent provisioning is basically an embedded setup utility. If anyone is familiar with HP, you might be familiar with what we used to have called Smart Start. It was a great setup wizard, walked you through step by step what you wanted to do. The biggest complaint we got was it was on a set of DVDs, usually 1 or 2. Customers said, A, I don't want to have to deal with them, and B, in 6 months or a year when I have to do it again, I have no idea where those things are, so I have to go download the latest and burn an ISO and run down that path. Now, all of that capability is embedded on that ILO chip. So as you boot up, you hit F10 and you pop right into intelligent provisioning. You say, I want to set this up, and then it walks you through. What are your settings? What's your operating system? Where are you loading that operating system from? Is it a USB? Is it a DVD? Do I want to point to a share drive, internal or something? All of that is embedded in there, and it tells you step by step. What we found is up to a 3 times faster deployment when you combine these two compared to even our older generation using the assisted. So it's a great way to save time as you get that set up and running, and it's free and it's embedded and runs on that ILO chip, so you can get to all of this, like I said, before anything else is set up on the system. So that's how we reduce the amount of time, or 2 quick ways when it looks like, when it's associated with the setup and install. The second thing you see here now on the screen comes into that second area where customers spend a lot of time, and that is tech support. No one enjoys being on the phone with tech support, whether it's HP or any other company, whether you're doing it for work or personal. No one enjoys that. So as we talk to customers, we ask very specifically, are there specific areas that we can really try to improve on? And one that they said repeatedly was that initial call time. As we talked to customers, they said, I'm spending too much time giving you, as HP, that information, so let's shorten that. That's where we came up with what you see on here called HP Active Health System. An active health system is a rolling log of all the system level events. It runs on ILO and is saved onto ILO. ILO has its own little dedicated flash component that it can save to, so that in the event that something does go wrong, again, you're spending less time for that initial call. Overall, the average for first call time was around 30 minutes, give or take, and that was playing a game of 20 questions, essentially, right? What's your server? What was the failure? Is it plugged in, if you ever made those calls? And then a little bit more information and maybe pulling 1 or 2 logs. Now, as you call HP, they can ask, well, what is your active health system log? Pull that for me. And instead of spending 30 minutes getting the information, it takes about 5. So what that means is we can both be off the phone. You guys off the phone as a customer and doing something productive or going home or whatever it might be, and us as HP off the phone and troubleshooting faster. So again, we looked at how do we shorten that time, so not only is it less time on the phone, but we're also getting to troubleshooting faster, so we can get around to that. And this is embedded, again, on every single server, runs on that ILO chip and saves onto that ILO chip, so you can go get it and send it to us at any time, even in the unlikely event that you have a full catastrophic style failure, you can still get to this log. Now the third area, remember it's setup and install, tech support. The third area here is firmware and driver updating, so we talk about system updating. And as we talk to customers, one of the things we hear a lot and that we ask them is, do you have some sort of maybe set cadence that you update your system firmware and drivers? And especially in the SMB market, we hear a lot of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it style strategy. And it sort of makes sense if you think about it. It's up and running. Why would I want to potentially take it down to update something? Well, the answer to that is obviously you want to be proactive as a customer. I think everyone sort of gets that. HP gets it. Most customers understand it. Being proactive is good. That firmware update, that driver update was released for a reason. It was to fix some problem. It would be great if you guys could, get on that now, and then I possibly won't have a failure in the future. But most customers said updating that is very time intensive and more importantly very complex, meaning if I do it wrong, I can crash my system. And like I just said, it's already running. So as we looked at this problem and as customers said, I'd like you to fix this, and by the way, this was probably one of the biggest ones we've seen, we came up with sort of a two-part solution, and you can see it on here. One is what you see on the header here. It's called Smart Update Manager, or SUM, and that's what I'll refer to it as, SUM. And the second, in the second line here on the end, you see a Service Pack for Client, or Service Packs. And the first thing we did with the Service Packs was say, let's not release these firmware and driver updates ad hoc, meaning we've got a bunch of different components and let's release them as needed and let's send emails to you guys every time one comes out, which, if you guys are aware, is quite often. We said let's pull those into a release pack and release them on a on a much more set cadence, so less often. We only release them, the goal is 3 to 4 times a year. Sort of depends on as updates are needed, but it's significantly less than it used to be. And then by pulling them into a single pack, we can test them together. We can do a lot more of those dependency checks, and we can be more confident that we're not going to have issues as they go and get installed. So now you guys know, okay, more confidence in the pack, and I can go download that single pack. What you then do is you turn around and you give that pack to SUM, which is a little program that knows how to do the installation. It's a free program, relatively easy to use, and when you give that to SUM will look at your servers. It can be one server, it can be a whole group of servers, you can do up to 100 servers at a time, and it will say, what is my environment, what updates do I need, and it will pull those out of the pack. It will then tell you, hey, this is what I'm about to do, A, B, and C. Does that look good? By the way, I'm going to reboot, and that's the point you would say, yeah, that's fine, or no, why don't you wait, my service window isn't quite here yet. And then after you're okay with that, you tell SUM to go, and SUM does all that legwork from there on out there. It sort of sees what's needed and pulls out the updates and knows things like, I need BIOS 3.4 before I can update to this firmware and driver. So it will update in that correct order. And it does it for very simple, maybe one tower server, up to very complex, a full blade chassis, and it knows to do what's called the OA, then virtual connect to then the individual blades. And it manages all of that, does it all, manages reboots, if any aren't, if no reboots are required, it doesn't reboot. If reboots are required, it should do a single reboot. And then it'll kick you out a report when it's done saying, here, this is what I did. So the goal here is, yes, save time. You can see it up here, up to 3 times faster update process. We compared using this versus doing a manual update process. But more importantly is that middle figure, up to 93% less downtime. Because people may mess up and forget and not read correctly. An automated program doesn't do that. So it allows you as a customer, you as a user, to have an easy way to update and be confident that you're not going to take the system down. And this, like I said, works for tower, rack, blade, new servers, most of the servers that we sold in the last about 5 years. So it's actually not just our Gen 8, to where you can use this tool to update everything very, very efficiently. So this was one of the biggest requests we got. We spent a ton of money developing this system to ensure that everybody could use it. All right, the last one here I want to talk about for just a second is something we term Insight Online, because, and this one's really geared towards a lot of what we view as the SMB market, because one of the hardest things to do if you have a smaller deployment is, how do I manage this hardware? How do I don't necessarily want to maybe set up a really complex central management server internally, but I also don't want to go to each server one at a time and waste the time looking for alerts. I'd rather get them all in a single place. And so Insight Online is another free tool that we have that, once enabled, and you do have to enable it, but like I said, it's free, it will basically gather up the information about your servers and send them off to HP. We will then collect them into a portal and give you a login, and then this is a cloud-based management system where it will show your servers, their configuration, health statuses. You can get email alerts when things go wrong, and then once you do your warranty entitlement, you can track all your warranty and care packs from that single place as well. So then you can go from behind your firewall or outside of your firewall, again, if you do a lot of travel or something like that, and see all the basic information about your servers without having to really set up too much from an internal perspective. You just basically enable it and connect with that ILO port that I talked about earlier and say, hey, send off this information to HP, and then you can get it from there. And if you do get that alert and see if something is going to go wrong or did go wrong, you can then go to that server and find it and troubleshoot either through the actual ILO interface or physically by plugging it in front of it. So again, really geared towards SMB customers of getting a relatively easy and inexpensive way to have a centralized management without you guys having to do the work. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm going to thank you guys very much for a couple minutes there, but really geared at how are we going to make these systems manage themselves so a customer, so you guys can save time. All right, flip it back over here, Juan.
All right, Josh. So I have a bunch of questions that I'd like to ask for the people who might be viewing this and who might be saying to themselves, wait a second, there needs to be a couple clarifications. So the first thing that I wanted to ask you about is, you say that these servers can be plugged in and connected and within 3 seconds be having a communication with the end user system. Is that hyperbole, or can that really happen?
No, we're not exaggerating there. I understand marketing tends to do that, but we're not exaggerating there. We have done all the tests, and it's about 3 seconds to seeing something. And it's kind of interesting you bring that up, because the second you plug that server in, ILO is able to do things, and that's sort of what enables it. I'm not waiting for it to power up before I spin something and then I can see. ILO gets power right away, it spins the graphics, and it is 3 seconds until you see something on screen. So that one's not a marketing spin, that one's actually true.
All right, so but it seems to me that there's a steep learning curve for all this. I mean, how steep is the learning curve? And you guys have a startup wizard in play that helps people. Are there other steps that you're taking as well to help people get set up and get things running?
Yeah, a lot of people view it as I'm not going to know how to use this and manage it, but there's been a big push recently to make everything more intuitive. That startup wizard you talked about, intelligent provisioning, I didn't even mention it. You can actually use that to manage as well. You can go in there and pull that active health system log I talked about. So it's actually very intuitive, and there's no setup required with that one. For some of our more advanced features, a customer might say, I'm not really sure I know how to use this. We're doing more of putting video tutorials out there. We have what we call a solution demo portal that shows how things are used, and that's an external. So we're trying to put a lot of stuff out there, but it's relatively easy, especially on these embedded tools that I've talked about today.
So can you define small and mid-sized business as HP defines that market?
Yeah, from an HP perspective, HP is a huge company. It can be anything up to 500 to 1,000 seats, so that can be pretty big. When I was talking today, I was trying to talk about tools that even the sub 500, 200, even and below can use, especially the embedded, like the setup utility and the Insight Online. Those are environments where we see customers who might have 2 servers or 3 servers, and then up from there, really utilizing, because again, it's not really requiring any setup from their perspective. So we did a lot for the I have 10 employees and 1 server, and I might have 50 employees and 2 servers market as we really looked at these.
And how is all of this different for small businesses? Is it a question of manpower? Is it a question of resources? Where do you guys step in and help them fill the gaps that they might need to fill?
Yeah, it really is manpower. Big businesses will tell you as well, we don't have enough people, but that's very different when you say I have a staff of 20 and I would like 22 versus I am the staff of 1, and you might actually wear another hat as well. So that was the goal. It was manpower. It was you don't have enough time in the day because you might be the IT person, that's the only one, or one of 2. You might also be the marketing person, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we take some of that off the plate? And that also ties back in, actually a good tie into what you asked earlier, of making them easier to use, a little bit more intuitive. So things like that setup wizard, you don't need to be an IT genius to use it. You might be able to do more with it if you know more, but it's really helping that manpower side.
Now, what do you think the biggest challenge for small businesses in terms of how they manage their data is? Is it the servers they're using? Is it the influx of volumes of data? What is the biggest challenge there with the information they're collecting?
Yeah, it's a couple-fold. I think volume and the influx is definitely a big one. People are looking at, I have so much more data coming in, how do I store it? Which we have some programs around. But then another big one is actually then, how do I access it faster? So it's managing the data and accessing it. And I didn't even talk about some of it, but we've even got other things around, a relatively inexpensive way where the server can say, hey, you're using this 15% of the information the most. Let me put that on your fastest storage. It's called Smart Cache. So how do you access it's a big one. And then the other one is, from an SMB perspective, do I keep my data locally or do I push it off to the cloud? And so from an HP side, what we say is, most customers for their business critical and secure data want to keep it in-house. It's a security thing. It gives you more control. So we are making sure we have the server that you can set up for that. We even have encryption capabilities these days. But at the same time, we want to make sure we have that option to connect out if there is something that a customer would want to store in the cloud as well. So we're giving them solutions on both sides, and then for that data that's being very close, we have encryption capabilities and faster access with things we call Smart Cache. So they're managing that data quite a bit more efficiently and faster as well.
You guys also talk a lot about self-sufficiency. These servers are self-sufficient. They run on their own, essentially. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and sort of break through some of the hyperbole to help people understand how they actually are self-sufficient?
Yeah, the term self-sufficient is, I think everyone sort of understands it. It's right. Let the server kind of auto-heal itself, even if it can. And a couple easy examples, I talked about the embedded setup, so you're not doing that work, but also something like failure alerts. It's pretty standard that you can do something has failed, send me an email, and we do allow that. You can set that up. But we also do things like predictive failure alerts, where let's look at the hardware inside that might be the most likely to fail. I'll take memory and hard drives because those are statistically the most likely to fail. Let's look at events that have occurred in the last week or 2 on that memory DIMM and have an algorithm that says, hey, I think this memory DIMM is about to fail, and then send off that alert in a predictive failure motion. And then from a customer, you can say, hey, oh, this DIMM is about to fail. Let me replace it on my time versus a failure in the middle of the day, which might be critical for my business. So it's everything we can do to make sure those servers kind of manage themselves and fix themselves as much as possible. So again, you're not having any downtime. That's what IT is really about, uptime.
You guys talk a lot about remote server management versus on-premises management. Which one is most effective, and can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the most effective from a what can I do is on-site, just because you can physically touch it, right? But the great thing about ILO and its advanced remote management capabilities is outside of physically removing a piece of hardware, that's pretty much all that you're not going to be able to do with the remote management. So we see a lot of businesses moving towards servers that have remote management capabilities and getting those capabilities, because what might take you 10 minutes to troubleshoot, if it takes me an hour to get there, it's going to take me hour there, 10 minutes, hour back. I wasted 2 hours of my day versus 10 minutes a day, or even worse if it's across country. So I see a lot of people moving towards give me the ability to remotely manage and remotely deploy, which is what the advanced features in ILO give. So outside of physically taking out a DIMM or something like that, ILO can do everything else you can as sitting physically in front of the server as well.
You guys talk a lot about proactive resolution as well. Is that the same thing as self-sufficiency, or is that something different? And if it is different, how does it benefit your clients?
Yeah, I mean, they're very similar in the idea and the end goal, which is uptime, right? I don't want to have to fix it. And the proactivity ties into maybe some actions that the customer that they're going to take, in that I want to make sure I set up this alert to send me something proactively. And then once you hit that point, the server is self-sufficient. It can be up and running. So they overlap a lot, but the end result is the same. You want more uptime from the server, and so we embed things in there to where the server can tell you proactively, I'm going to fail. And we even have from, if you take that to the next level, a proactive support and service aspect where we can contact you before things go wrong and such. So it's not just the hardware, it's some of the actual support and service contract side that we allow and enable as well.
All right, let's say that anybody watching this immediately walks away and follows everything you've said step by step. They implement everything you want them to implement, and they use it to its fullest. What do you think the #1 gain for them will be? Will it be fewer resources wasted? Will it be better data management? I mean, what are they going to gain by working with you and doing everything you said to do today?
Yeah, I think the marketing answer there is fewer resources wasted. Now, that might mean you are at your kid's soccer game paying attention on Saturday. It might mean you get to leave on time. But it also might mean fewer resources wasted. It might mean I'm not spending 3 hours every day troubleshooting and updating. I'm working on whatever the next project is. Because what we always see, and I think it's regardless of IT or whatever anybody does, there's always something to do. So it's being able to kind of adjust that time from putting out fires to doing something better, or paying attention to your kids or family, or going home, or whatever it might be.
All right. I'd like to thank Josh for joining me today. This is Juan Martinez for CBS Interactive. Thank you to our sponsor, HP. Again, if you have any questions before you click out of here, click the Ask a Question button and submit your question. And as soon as we get the question in, we'll send it over to Josh and have Josh provide an in-depth answer for you. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.